Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. Today we're going to continue on with our conversation. Well, it's really just kind of an extension of the conversation we were having last time, which was over the Green Revolution, and really the last of the agricultural revolutions that we've seen up to this point is what's called the Bio-Revolution. Now I've seen some people kind of lump together the Green Revolution and Bio-Revolution. I've seen it separated between the two. So in the way that I teach it in my course, I separate the two because when we talk about the Green Revolution and the Bio-Revolution, there are really two distinct practices as far as I see it that differentiate between the two. In the Green Revolution, you see more of a, how you might say, organic crossbreeding of plants and animals and things like that. In the Bio-Revolution, we're getting down to more of a scientific use of genetic engineering and going down to the genetic level, kind of an intentional scientific practice to change the genetic code of plants and animals in order to get improved outcomes or improved output. So when we talk about the biorevolution, it's going to revolve around intentional genetic modification of plants and animals. This is where we get the development of GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And of course, I'm sure you've heard talk on the news and you've heard talk among newspapers and maybe teachers and your biology teachers and things like that, and they talk about GMOs and some of the concerns we have with GMOs in our world today, especially the concern for how our bodies will handle them over the long term. And so at least you're probably somewhat familiar with some of the elements of the biorevolution, even though maybe you didn't know it as a term. So again, we're looking at things like genetic engineering, looking at the genetic code of plants and animals, and really the purpose is to improve agricultural production. Really, any of these revolutions between the Green Revolution and Biorevolution, looking at ways that we can increasingly and more effectively feed a growing population in our world today, because obviously that's been a concern ever since Thomas Malthus's day. So we're looking to grow plants and animals that can grow faster. They can also grow larger, meaning that we can get more food per unit. Reduce the use of pesticide by building in pesticides into the plants, and then also creating plants that are drought resistant, so that you don't have to use as much water. And then of course with animals, you're looking at things like you're trying to get animals that you can increase the amount of meat that you can get per animal. Also, you can get more quantities of milk as well as higher qualities of milk that are produced by animals. Of course, there's the biorevolution and genetic engineering and genetic modification is highly contentious in many areas. And those who support say that for the world that we have, it helps to increase the output of agricultural production at a reduced cost. Because if you are able to grow more food on less land, you can decrease your costs. You don't have to use as much land. You can also reduce costs by not having to use as much fertilizer, not having to use as much water, and so that's going to improve the food consumption, at least improve the amount of food that we create, so that more people can have more food around the world. And that's really kind of whenever we talk about the new developments in agricultural technology, that's always the discussion, is we're trying to create more food for more people in our world. For those who are critics of the biorevolution and concerned for these types of agricultural practices, these are very similar across pretty much any of the agricultural revolutions and any new agricultural practices. These tend to be the typical criticisms. Things like you're developing whenever you have large-scale agricultural practices, typically you are growing just a couple of strands of DNA of crop, or you have very similar crops, and so the concern that you have the increased risk of crop disease, especially if the seeds that are being developed are the same seeds, and throughout the world you're using the same types of seeds, so you make the crops more susceptible to certain types of diseases. And of course that's the same with animals. So there's a lack of genetic diversity among the crops and animals that are being grown, which make them more susceptible to blight and to some type of harvest failure, things along those lines. Some say that because of some of the weaknesses of the plants and animals, you need more pesticides. You need more, like in animals, you need antibiotics because they're living in cramped, crowded conditions. And so As a result, you're having to give the animals antibiotics, which people say they have adverse effects on humans and the way we develop and things along those lines. And then, of course, there's the discussion of how these more expensive agricultural practices are going to push out small farmers, and you're going to pretty much leave agricultural production and land ownership to the wealthier individuals, the large corporations. And of course, the idea here is that the seeds themselves are more expensive because there's more science behind them. They're patented. Not only that, the cultivation of them is more expensive because you need new farming equipment. You need certain types of pesticides to use on the plants, and so the production of it is just more expensive. And so these small scale farmers are not going to be able to afford these types of things. And then another one that's not on here is the increased use of water and land because of the increased agricultural production that's going to take place as a result of the biorevolution and the growing population. And again, those are just kind of some of the general criticisms that go along with new agricultural practices anyhow. Interestingly enough, when we look at new agricultural practices, we're actually able to cultivate more food per unit of land than we've ever been able to. We actually don't even need as much land. But of course, still the arguments of things like lack of genetic diversity, the idea that we're not really sure what the effects on our bodies will be later on as we consume these on a regular basis. Those are all arguments that still stand for individuals who are against things like genetic modification. And so now it's time for another quiz ferret. Quiz Ferret, our furry little friend, has popped his head out of the ground to ask us another question. This actually goes back to our previous video to see what you remember, how well you've been paying attention. This is just more of kind of a general knowledge question. Who was the American scientist who started the Green Revolution? Pause the video, see what you know, see who you know. The answer to that is Norman Borlaug. So hopefully you got that right. And so I hope you enjoyed this video on the biorevolution. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those below. And I hope to see you next time.